going to lay out the core of it. Tobacco sends your prayers to heaven, and it's immediate, and they're listened to. This idea that our soil is related to our consciousness is massive. Every human being has a superpower of some sort. It's a reality distortion effect that every human being has based on the consciousness. There's basically two forms of evil in the world that are informing us. With the Ahrimanic times that we're in, or the Ahrimanic deception, came this idea that we can beat Mother Nature at her own game. Part of what's going on here is we're in some kind of a simulation of some sort. There's very good evidence that Jesus was an Essene. They had an encampment near Qumran, right on the Dead Sea. Last year I did 70 days of water fasting. It's crazy the power of it. It's truly hacking the matrix, in my opinion. Rudolf Steiner, also Sri Yukteswar and Yogananda. Those guys basically said that the Kali Yuga, the Age of Darkness, ended in 1899. Light is coming into the world in larger and larger and larger amounts. I'm going to say something that's illegal. We're alone in the universe. Like, what kind of crazy, weird idea or belief or virtue is that? It just doesn't make sense. It's like you have all the trees, all the amazing things. It's all around you right now. The parks, the grass, the sun, the moon, the snow, the ice, the this. I mean, just so it's standing room only of spirit and soul, and we live actually in a magical realm. Now, our time, eventually, okay, so let me take you back. When I was a kid, about 14 years old, I started off with Tony Robbins at a place called Super Camp. This is before Personal Power, before he became famous. So I've known Tony Robbins since 1984. And he said something in one of his tapes, that I later got into, that if you want to be a leader, you've got to be a reader. So I started reading every book I could get my hands on. I became a voracious reader. And then inevitably, I stumbled into the magical reality that's actually surrounding us. And I think Rudolf Steiner, one of my favorite philosophers, writers, speakers of all time, put it best. And he basically, his concept is that we're in an Ahrimanic deception, or all civilizations all over the world right now, in the great thrust of ideas and ideals, we've been thrust into a deception. And the Ahrimanic deception is this idea that that's dead, this is alive, no, that's a rock, that has no life force, calories, count calories, not life force. Don't worry about the chemicals we're spraying, but you need this many grams of protein. So that eventually I was washed clean of those Ahrimanic deception ideas or ideals. Now, what does that mean, Ahrimanic deception? What Rudolf Steiner says, that there's basically two forms of evil in the world that are informing us. I say evil, but we could also use parasitism, or we could also just say like guardrails that are saying, hey, you're off track. Go back in the middle here, because that's really what it is. It's like evil is kind of like a way of getting our soul back on track. This is the Rudolf Steiner perspective, and became my personal perspective. And what ended up happening is I started realizing what Rudolf Steiner had said in the deepest way, is that right now we're in a polarity of materialism. Maybe not you, maybe not me, but geez, in the outer world out there, people count how many yachts they got, how much mansions, how much money's in the bank, this, that. I mean, it's all about the dollars. It's all about the money. And it's also about the scientism worldview, which is we're going to explain everything through science, trust the science, science this, science that. What about this? Science, science, science. But right there, immediately, when I first came across that stuff, I started realizing science can't quantify nor predict a synchronicity. So there are phenomena that are outside of being able to even be scientifically analyzed, which is very important. And they usually are impregnated with meaning. Like, for example, I was telling you earlier, I went outside into the jungle yesterday to relieve myself on a tree. And I was walking down the path and I looked down and there was an avocado sitting up, perfectly ripe. And it was from my best tree too, by the way. It was up on the hill. So it rolled down the hill right to where I was on the path and was sitting up. And I was like, huh. Now, for me, one of the things that I learned over the years is that every human being has a superpower of some sort. They have a superpower of some sort, and you've got to figure out what it is. Now, for me personally, my main thing is public speaking, but the phenomenon that occurs around me is something will fall and land standing up. It's a phenomenon. It goes on, and everybody has this going on. They just go, oh, they don't look at it, or they pretend it's not happening, or it's a reality distortion effect that every human being has based on the consciousness. And that's how this avocado was. It was sitting up, and I was like, wow. And then when I picked it up, I was like, it's unhurt. It's perfectly ripe. Like, wow. And so, this is more of a I guess, a way of looking at the world as being filled with all kinds of interesting and beneficial and beneficent energies, spirits, however you want to describe it. And that worldview eventually, it, it's like waves shaped reshaping the beach. Doesn't happen the first exposure to it, but eventually you go, oh, people are just, they're deceived by materialism. Um, you can also be deceived by the other form of evil, by the way, or parasitism, or the other guardrail on the other side of the road, which is escapism. And this was core of Rudolf Steiner's philosophy. And when I landed on Rudolf Steiner, I finally was like, this guy was, he's just something else. I mean, he left behind 1,000,000 pages of work, bro. 1,000,000 pages. Let me just chunk that into the numbers, because let's get our mnemonic and we'll chunk it down to the numbers. That's 50 to 60 pages every single day, Monday through Sunday, from age 15 to 65, every single day. Just think about that and think that one through. And so when I realized that, I was like, whoa, there's something really different about Rudolf Steiner. And so his philosophy has become very popular lately because people were starting to realize, like, whoa, this guy was right. He was right. What an amazing thing.
Dude, he's even got the like there's the Steiner schools which are, like they honor the human being in such different ways in terms of their education and development and the processes they go through. Yeah, there's some, and even just thinking that it wasn't in a time of, because now like writing 50, 60 days like words a day, you pump it into chat GPT, you might even get something get something going. But this we're talking pre-internet. This is
Pre-internet. So
pre-computers,
internet or
pre-phones. This
writing,
is
it's really hard to write. You're like, maybe today we could go, okay, you got a computer, you could just bang stuff out, chat GPT, whatever. But this guy, he didn't have that. He had typewriters in his hand and he's speaking. So a lot of his stuff was transcribed. It's just fascinating to, see these really interesting people in history. And when you plug into Rudolf Steiner's whole take on our reality, it's a magical reality. I mean, Waldorf education is educating the child. That's what his educational system was called for children. And by the way, it was the Waldorf education got its name from the Waldorf Astoria cigarette company, because the owner of that company back in Germany back in the day wanted his workers to have like daycare for the kids and wanted good education for the kids. And so he hired Rudolf Steiner to come in and do the education programs for the kids. And that's where the name Waldorf comes from. It comes from the Waldorf Astoria cigarette company.
That
Is that
is
hilarious?
so trippy. I did not see that coming at all. And actually, that probably opens us up into a really cool conversation in just a moment. But one of the things I wanted to double click on was just, yeah, it's really interesting feeling into our Aramaic forces. And like you said, like that's over embedding us into materialism. And then we've got these, like escapism is the other force. And those are kind
Yeah,
of
he
those
called those
Luciferic,
Luciferic forces.
the
Luciferic. You're
Luciferic
familiar with that.
forces.
Were you familiar with this before? You are, aren't
Well,
you?
yeah, a little bit around. We've had some very interesting conversations with some Rosicrucians on the podcast. Robert J. Gilbert. I'm not sure if you've come across his work, but he puts this all in frame. And similar to how you described it, it's these forces. We demonize them, but actually they're like. And I love the way you introduced it so cleanly. Is like these are actually course correction mechanisms. Even if you look at them as fallen angels, these guys are playing a really tough role in why they're doing this so that you can wake up to your light. Touchwood,
Well
really
said.
trippy. Really
Yeah,
trippy.
like the demon, whatever. The demon is actually in a very difficult position because they're actually trying to help you actually by going, don't come this way, go that way, the other way. You're off target. And so, that's the philosophy that kind of backs everything that I do. We live in a magical reality, and what Rudolf Steiner was describing with his biodynamic farming is essentially a form of magic. Right? You mix this stuff from the heavens, this stuff with the earth together, and boom, there you have the mystical union of the opposites. And all of a sudden, you've got Biodynamic Prep 500, Biodynamic Prep 501, Biodynamic Prep 502. And these are amendments that we use on this farm, for example. We're a certified biodynamic farm. And Rudolf Steiner was really probably credited with developing the whole idea of a standardization of quality for food. So right on the heels of biodynamic farming came the organic food certifications, which started, I think, around 1940, and it was Rodale in Pennsylvania that sorted that out. But it was based on, all his people were Rudolf Steiner people, so it really came from Rudolf Steiner.
I do want to find out more about biodynamic, but before we double click on that, you just mentioned like the Waldorf school is coming from this place of like, hey, it was actually for a tobacco company, and this is where speaking to what we were speaking to, tobacco is, let's just take that as one example, of so many things that we could scratch the itch on. In terms of, here we've got a really incredible plant, which before I met your work, I didn't realize plants kind of had a spirit. Pardon me for that. Thank you for your work. And so
Yay.
tobacco has this really incredible spirit, right? Like it's a master plant, master teacher. I'd love to get your thoughts on tobacco. But then you've kind of got the mass consumed tobacco via cigarettes in the world. And there's like, those two things are kind of night and day. I'd just love
Yes.
to sort of get that,
Wow.
because if we could
What a
use that
great.
as an
Okay.
example, yeah.
Let me show you something. Okay, so this is just one of those crazy things in life that you just would never predict. Like maybe I smoked a cigarette once or twice when I was like, like 18 years old, 19, 20 at a party or something like that. And I was like, this is terrible. I don't want nothing to do with this. And years later, I was at this is about 25 years ago. I was at an ayahuasca ceremony, and about 25 years ago. So I'm an old timer in that world. And the ayahuasca spirit basically came to me. He's like, you're going to grow the best tobacco in the world. You're going to be the best tobacco farmer in the world. And I remember, I have no context to this. To me, it's like total poison. I'm like, what are you like? What are you talking about? I didn't have any context whatsoever to understand tobacco, but that was the message I got. Very shortly thereafter, one of my employees brought me two tobacco plants, kind of synchronistically. And I was like, okay, it's on. Let's see what happens. And I just kept at it for many years. I've been a tobacco farmer now for 25 years. And, I don't do any of the stuff that is normally done with tobacco farming, straight lines in fields and none of that. Tobacco is the most human of the vegetative plants. And it listens to you and wants to be around you. So for example, the shamans in the Amazon say the tobacco will grow where it can hear your conversations. My God, man, I never planted them around the house, but they are growing right underneath where we talk every night on the corner of my deck, right underneath around both sides of tobacco plants. I've never planted them there. It just found where it wanted to grow. Like I've been growing tobacco in the yard at various different spots, but somehow most of the tobaccos in this farm now grow right next to the house, right where we hang out. It's coincidence? Can't be a coincidence. Can't be a coincidence. For many years of using the, trying to think of the name of it, it's a technique of playing Baroque music to sonic bloom. That's the name of it. Playing Baroque music to plants. And I did that in an indoor farm for many years, not a cannabis farm, but actually grew many different things, cacti, bananas, all kinds of things. I found that the big leaf plants like banana, that the leaf is an ear. The plant uses it to hear. So I found that the bigger the leaves were in that particular farm using sonic bloom, which is an auditory aid to help plants grow, the bigger the leaves were, the more the plant reacted. Whereas cacti wouldn't react at all because they don't have any ears. What an amazing thing that was, that discovery. At any rate, this tobacco journey eventually led me to becoming a tobacco farmer. This is my tobacco right here. And you can see how golden it is, because what we go for here is we go for the golden notes. We don't use any chemicals. This is certified organic, certified biodynamic. It's never had a chemical. And this, when I give people this for as a râpé, up the nose, or if they want to smoke tobacco, I give them a smoke, or they want to make a smudge, they come back to me and they're like, what's going on? And I was like, see how bad the lie is? See how bad it is? Because once you try this tobacco, now I don't sell this. I will in the future probably, but I currently don't. But people don't know. They just think it's the junk that's sold on the internet, or that you get from this local corner store is in any way doable. It's not. It's absolutely toxic because it's filled with 800 chemical additives. 800.
Hey there, inspired souls. Just wanted to take a quick moment out to thank all of you that are subscribed to the channel. Thank you so much for your incredible love and support. For all of you that haven't yet subscribed, everything you see around here is powered and empowered by your subscription. Please take a moment, hit the button below, the subscribe button, hit that bell notification icon, and help us champion love, positivity, and wisdom around the planet. With that, back to David in today's episode. This is where I start to get confused a little bit, because part of me goes, did they just do that because tobacco was already a plant that wanted to support us, and it was like people needed tobacco and it was there to like support people through their stress systems or something, and then just added all these chemicals into it because it was easy to produce or was helping? or was it somewhat intentional to sort of hijack a plant that was so sacred and so profound, and then sort of bastardize it down so we ended up with a disconnection to something that was so fundamental? Like, I never know the right answer, and maybe it's on somewhere on the spectrum between the two.
I would say this: Ahrimanic forces, however you want to interpret what that means, Ahrimanic forces. See, when you get to the tobacco conversation, it's fascinating you went right there. To me, it's amazing because what tobacco is, I'm going to lay out the core of it. Tobacco sends your prayers to heaven, and it's immediate and they're listened to. So when you take a hit of the tobacco, or you do a snuff of the tobacco, or you do an ambil or something of the tobacco, and you, with intention, pray to your creator, your prayers go straight to heaven. That's the core of the whole thing. The forces that, this is why you will see like super wealthy stockbrokers or whatever, they just made whatever $1 trillion, whatever, and they're smoking cigars. What they're really doing is casting prayers for more abundance to come in. It's all subconscious. They don't even know they're doing it. And so when we get conscious about it, this to me is the core of all Western psychedelic ceremony. And every shaman knows that. Everyone knows that that tobacco is at the core of it. As soon as you start getting into mass production, Ahrimanic forces come in and they're like, oh, this is a real powerful tool of people being able to communicate with their God, with God. And so they immediately set out to disrupt it. If you look at what the whole food industry has done and all of the unbelievable amounts of junk that's made into fast food, all those people were tobacco people and they moved into the food industry. They're all related. They're all related. So here, now let's get back to, like, is it nicotine? Nicotine is one of the most powerful medicines on earth. It's the number in, if you had to ask me, like, what's number one for longevity of any single molecule in nature, it's nicotine. It's not addictive. That's a myth. That's been a known myth for years. I mean, everyone knows that. Anybody who's close to tobacco, like me, been growing it for 25 years, nicotine has nothing to do with there's no addiction. It's pyrazines. Pyrazines are the addictive compounds that are added to tobacco, and some there naturally. That's the addictive substance, not nicotine. If it was nicotine, they'd have to put nicotine behind glass cases in stores because people would come for their nicotine fix and they'd be overwhelmed by it. But that's not how it works. So it's the whole thing of understanding tobacco, to me, is actually one of the core discoveries and one of the core realizations that wakes you up like a domino effect well down the line. What a cool thing. I mean, I just want to just show you this because, like, here, this is all. So here's another thing. Like, for me, I'm not a farmer and fence lines and straight lines, and just that has nothing to do with the way I do things. This tobacco right here, this batch, this is just all wild, naturally, like, fermented into this beautiful color on the plant. So it teaches you, by the way, how to ferment it. Like, this stuff, I just walked right up and just broke it off. It was already ready. You know how palm trees will leave their dead leaves below like this, right? That's what tobacco does, just like that. So you don't even have to be versed in how to ferment it, anything. The plant tells you everything of how to deal with it.
Offers itself up. Yeah.
Offers itself up. It's crazy. So you'll see in here, I wonder if, well, I don't think you can see it, but that one's downstairs. This one, you can see, these are my vanilla beans. And this is really something. Smell this. So I usually put vanilla in. Oh, yeah, there's a vanilla bean right there, actually, in this one. You can see there's a vanilla bean right there.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man, the aroma just hit me. Hold on. Whoa, I'm a vanilla grower. That took many years to figure that one out, but we knock it out of the park on our vanilla, which, by the way, we do sell. We're the only certified biodynamic, certified organic vanilla in the United States.
So let's have a chat about the word biodynamic, because I'd love to get us, like the audience, educated, like I'm myself educated a little bit on what that really means, because there's all, like, it can get a bit like organic, biodynamic. There's all these different words, and yeah, I mean, once again, even just getting your frame on like where regular food is at, because even something like, I look at some of the old crests and stuff that big old families used to have back in the day. They'd all have this like wheat shaft, on their crest, and it was like this real. It represented abundance. It represented, like, and now people are like, every man and his dog is almost gluten, like can't do gluten, it seems. And it's like, where have we come with this, even just as like as something as symbolic as wheat? And then if you can introduce that conversation into biodynamic versus organic versus whatever everybody gets at the local supermarket.
With the Ahrimanic times that we're in, or the Ahrimanic deception, came this idea that we can beat Mother Nature at her own game. And as a farmer myself for all my life, there's certain plants that are going to do well in your ecosystem and others not. And so what we're trying to do with this chemical farming is trying to force it. We're trying to force something that really shouldn't be there. Push it back with a farmer's fence line, spray all these chemicals, keep Mother Nature away, and that will never work. It's unsustainable. So that gave rise to a quality certification that was really started in the 1920s by Rudolf Steiner, which he called biodynamic farming. And biodynamic farming has to do with a specific pattern of using preparations. They're more like homeopathic preparations for your farm, interestingly. And by the way, if you look at kind of like what are the Ahrimanic forces and Luciferic forces are always trying to drive us away from the homeopathic principle, which is very telling, very telling. If you look, they're always attacking homeopathy, any homeopathic principle. They want to stop it. And why is that? Well, it's probably because it works so darn well. And as a homeopathic principle, biodynamic farming it's phenomenal. It basically, I'm going to say something that's illegal. Okay, I'm going to tell you. I'm just going to come out with it because no one else will say it. It's just crazy how much people have bought this idea of Lavoisier's law, or nothing is created, nothing is destroyed. That's completely made up. It's totally, entirely made up in the mind. It has no reality. So you're like, wait, what are you saying now? So this is what I'm saying. When you create a biodynamic preparation, let's say biodynamic 500, which is the cow manure in the horns, bury it through the winter. So you need a lactating cow pooping. You take that poop, you put it in horns from either cows that lost their horns or from dead cows, and then you bury those in the earth through the winter cycle, then dig them back out, empty the horns. This is just one of the 10 or 11 biodynamic preps. You empty those horns into a big, let's say a 55-gallon drum of spring water. And you swirl it one way, and as you're going, let's say if you're going counterclockwise, you're going, whoa, you're going up. And as you go clockwise, you go down in sound. And you do that for an hour. So 1 minute counterclockwise, 1 minute clockwise. This is actually what biodynamic farming is. And it's super amazing when you do it. Like, for example, one of my favorite biodynamic preps is when we do the 500 when Saturn and the moon are in opposition. Because the Saturn is an organizing force, right? It's constantly making all these structures and organizing and everything. And the moon is basically pulling, right? So it's pulling. And so, that it's good for roots. It's root development. So biodynamic prep 500 is for root development. Now, when we're sitting there on the stairs next to my house and we're mixing this thing up for an hour, and that those planetary forces are in play, you can feel it. You can feel it. And it's epic. Anyway, what ends up happening is that you end up producing more than was there before. For example, there's more minerals, there's more friendly bacteria. Where did they come from? Where did they come from? See, this is the thing. If we get to the Ahrimanic deception, at the very bottom of it all, is this idea of Lavoisier's law. Nothing is created, nothing is destroyed. Says who? Who made that up? It's completely made up. Prove it. Yeah, I can prove to you that's the opposite of that. I can prove to you, for example, just with the cycles of the moon, Dr. Hauschka proved this. He was one of Rudolf Steiner's famous students. He proved that the weight of sprouts will change with where the moon depends on the cycle of the moon, what phase it's in. Just think about that. So we think of weight as like, no, it's always this weight, 0.1 grams. Nope. No, that's been disproven for it all along. It's just the overlay of trying to just simplify it and try to oversimplify. That's the Ahrimanic deception. The weight of sprouts will fluctuate with the phase of the moon. So where's the extra weight coming from? And I thought everything equal. Like, what is this? And this is how deceived we are. So when you get, but you're automatically healed of all that when you just get into nature and you just become an innocent observer and you start playing around with the magic of Rudolf Steiner and you start going like, what the heck is going on here? I mean, whoa. And that to me is really, that's where their great healing comes from, because you step out of the Ahrimanic deception, which, by the way, Ahrimanic precepts, ideas, and ideals will cause heart attack, will cause stroke, will cause arthritis, will cause sclerosis, will cause calcification. Because Ahrimanic forces, the materialistic ideals, they essentially, they're like rocks, and they eventually form, the ideas even form rocks in your system, microscopically, of course, and that silts you up and causes stroke, heart attack, arthritis, bursitis, etc., where you have calcium showing up in the wrong place. Big thing. So I can tell already, like if I'm a nutritionist, if I'm talking to somebody and I'm saying like, okay, I can tell they're a type A personality. They're going to work. They never get any time in nature. They have no connection to the magical reality. They're going to die of a heart attack or stroke or arthritis or something of a calcification disease. 100%. And that's something just to be aware of, because if you know that about yourself, you got to go, I better get my hour in nature over here, because if I don't, and that's how I am, a type A personality, I'm just going to work nonstop. I have to let that go. I have to stop working, stop screens, and I have to go out on the farm. I have to go pick the food. I have to go dig the holes. I got to do something that's not screens or phone or anything like that. Otherwise, I'm going to end up in trouble. And I bet there's a lot of people listening thinking that too. The other side, by the way, the escapism is trying to say, oh, none of it matters anyway. Oh, who cares? You know, that's the other energy on the other side of the road, the other guardrail. We have to be careful of that too, because it basically takes us away from our focus and our capability of really developing, for example, a great and beautiful farm, or great and beautiful tobacco, or great and beautiful chocolate, or great and beautiful lettuce, or whatever the things are that we grow.
Hi there, guys. I wanted to take a quick moment just to introduce you to my one-to-one coaching. It's something that I deeply love doing. As you can tell, conscious conversation is such a massive part of my life. And having one-to-one, deep, meaningful conversations with people where I get to show up as your brother or as the coach or as your mentor has been such a gift for me personally, and a gift for lots of the people that I have supported on the journey of living a more spiritually empowered, spiritually powered, spiritually aligned life. You don't have to take my word for it. Here's some examples of people all around the world that have experienced profound transformations through this coaching experience.
Amrit is a fantastic coach.
In a few sessions, he got to a depth that I'd only experienced before working with certain medicines. And
he's gone through a lot of the struggles that you're probably facing, and Amrit's been a really strong, supportive figure in my journey.
In control of myself.
I'm kinder to myself.
I actually have that vision and a purpose.
I do feel like I'm a better version of myself already.
Amazing energy.
He was easy to talk to, which made me easy to trust him.
Working with Amrit at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and really I was bouncing out of bed.
Whenever I get off the calls with Amrit, best money we've ever spent.
I would not recommend him because I don't want everyone to know about him, and then I won't be able to book him. If he gets too busy, I won't get my turn.
I would say absolutely.
There's no way you can work with Amrit for a period of time without being transformed.
So if you're considering him as a coach, do not hesitate, because you won't be disappointed.
Alrighty, so hopefully that's inspiring your evolution onwards and upwards. And if you are so inspired to evolve, you can book in a one-to-one call with me directly at www.amrit.coach/life. And guys, if I can say so myself, I do think this is something quite special. Most people that I see building things online don't really work with people this deeply, this intimately, one-on-one as things start to grow, just because it is so time intensive. And yet I'm so deeply passionate about the transformation that comes from one-to-one coaching that just isn't available anywhere else. It would be my absolute honor and a pleasure to support your spiritual awakening, your spiritual path, your spiritual unfoldment. It is my life's work. I look forward to seeing you in the call. Back to today's podcast. It's really interesting at this particular juncture in the conversation. I really wish there was a David Avocado Wolfe podcast. I'm writing down guests that I want to see you talk to, which is like Clint Ober. He literally came out on the podcast this week here at the Inspired Evolution.
Oh,
he
yeah,
was
Clint knows me
and grounding. Yeah, and it just
Clint,
would be
Clint's
such a
promoter.
it'd be such a great conversation. And And also like Veda Austin. I don't have you come across
I know
Veda's
Veda.
work with water? Yeah, like you two
She's
talking
epic
together. I
too.
was just like, oh my god, So anyway, that's not like you don't have enough to do. And we just talked about being type, and honestly, the type A conversation is so profound because yeah, like I notice part of my downtime is now just to pick up a guitar and literally take I've got a 1-year-old Touchwood and just walk out into the garden and just sit there and just play a couple of songs with bare feet on the earth ever since I had that conversation with Clint. And just feeling like you come back and it's better than a meditation in some ways. It's just like you've just reset. Like it's amazing. One of the things, so I love how you brought into frame like this is what's going on in Saturn, this is what's going on to the moon, and this is what's going on with the vegetal like plant life here on the planet. And as we're playing with it and we're tuning in and experiencing that, there is so much awareness that brings into the frame around food, like something that can be as 2D as nutrition, food, and the general conversations that we're having. One of the conversations I wanted to bring into there is I never knew what detail meant until I came across your work. So maybe you can give a moment to explain detail. And
Yep.
just while we're on there, I know I'm like laden in the questions with multiple questions, but also because what started to happen for me as I started to recognize this was from your teachings was it's almost like a blockchain. It's like each thing retains the memory of the previous transaction, and that changed how I started viewing food and what I was consuming infinitely, because it's not like, oh, that's a carrot versus, oh, this was a carrot that was grown biodynamically. Like this carrot has eaten a whole bunch of different things than this particular carrot that's been sprayed with pesticide that ate very different things. I'm not eating what I'm eating what I ate. So there's a couple of concepts in there, but also the detail conversation. And yeah, if I could just put that into the field and get you to riff on it.
I first became aware of the D Dao idea from one of my teachers, Ron Teagarden, who's one of the great herbalists of Los Angeles and probably he's one of the great health gurus of the last 100 years in America, because what he was able to do is to bring not Chinese medicine teachings, but before that, the great Taoist teachings that gave rise to Chinese medicine, that birthed it. And the great teachings of the Shaolin monasteries and what they had learned, and the teachings of the tonic herbs, the top 100 herbs in Chinese medicine, because ultimately we don't need every herb on earth. It's nice to have like marjoram or rosemary or thyme or something, for a dish or whatever. But when we're dealing with tonic herbs, I'm not talking about thyme or rosemary. I'm talking about things that can be consumed almost every single day throughout all the seasons to great benefit and effect, having 5,000 years of history. For example, reishi mushroom, chaga mushroom, etc. Now, the Di Dao idea is that the thing that comes from the place is, if it's in its home territory, that's the thing. So, for example, this farm here is called Noni Land because Noni is from here. It's from North Shore of this island, brought by the Star people, according to the locals. That's what they say. So when I drank a shot of Noni juice before coming and doing the show with you from our own farm here. It's from the place. That's D Dao. We are D Dao for Noni here. We're also D Dao for kukui nut. We're D Dao for, what else is a big one that comes out of here? We're D Dao for, what's a favorite original? The ohia tree, for example, the great ohia trees of Hawaii, which colonize lava fields. By the way, Noni can grow. It's a fruit tree that can grow right out of a lava field. No soil. And when you see that, you're like, what? Huh? What's going on here? Like, that's how epic it is, because it's from the place. Now, in Chinese medicine, there's this idea of from the place. If we say reishi mushroom, people think China, but actually reishi mushroom is found in every forested ecosystem worldwide, including in Australia, all across. I've actually foraged reishi mushroom in almost every continent on Earth except Antarctica, and on many different tropical islands as well. So that wouldn't count, but let's just say something like Ho Shu Wu or He Shu Wu. That's a great longevity tonic herb. It's from a certain area of China. That's the Di Dao spot where it's from. So it's always going to be best to come from that spot. And all the great herbs like this, like Central South China, that's where Gynostemma comes from, arguably the greatest of all Chinese herbs. That's where it's from. So that's where you should get it from. That's the best source of it. That's Di Dao.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that. And then, yeah, this blockchain effect, like of I'm not what I'm eating, I'm what I'm eating ate. Can you unpack that for us? Because that was huge for me when I started to understand that from your work.
It's such an important awareness, is that the food that we're eating has to come from a healthy soil. The soil has to be happy and bright and vibrant and active and loaded with earthworms. And so that means that the plants are eating all that good nutrition, which is really, they're really almost always bacterial and fungal poop, for lack of a better term, right? It's the waste products of a fungus and a bacteria is what the plants are eating as their food. And so that's kind of, that's just that beautiful cycle of nature. Nothing is wasted, everything is used. And if you do your job right, and this is getting back to this principle again, that I'm not into Lavoisier's law, you can actually create more than was there before. And people go, where does it come from? Where's the energy come from? Where's the matter come from? Where's the bacteria come from? Like in biodynamic farming, we can have 25 trillion bacteria that weren't there before. Where'd they come from? They come from another dimension. I don't know what else to say. That's it. They come from another dimension in this one. I mean, it doesn't matter. But this idea that, no, everything has to be boxed in and make perfect sense. It's got to be in a box and it's got to be understandable box. Is like, oh man, we got to get out of the box. Anyway, so this idea that our soil is related to our consciousness is massive, massive. The soil is related to our gut health is also massive. One of the biggest breakthroughs, we were talking about this last night in my house, we're talking about BPC 157, which is a very popular peptide that people are taking for healing. And it's usually injected into the area where the injury is, like a knee injury or something. And it's body protection compound 157. Where was it first isolated? And by the way, peptides and BPC 157 is a smaller than 50 amino acid chain code. It's basically what it is, a code. But BPC 157 was first isolated from stomach lining. What this discovery about BPC 157 means is that your stomach lining is involved in the production of new and healthy tissue throughout your body. Just think about the implications of what that means, right? You're like, whoa, wait, what? Like my stomach lining. So we think we eat the food and the food eventually works its way through our body. But no, a lot of what actually becomes us is created by us too. It's created by us. It's like your body protection compounds that are found in your gut lining. And that gut lining sloughs off and is absorbed as a super nutrient. It's a super nutrient. In fact, if we could argue, and I do make this argument, and it's become very popular now, what I'm about to tell you, is that actually the most powerful things for the human immune system and just for humanity in general and just for almost all life forms are what are called synbiotics or postbiotics, which are the excretions or waste products of acidophilus, of bifidus infantis, of friendly bacteria that live with us. These are when you isolate that material, and in Japan and in Korea and China for 1,000 years, they've done this, and you crystallize it and you consume it, it's more powerful than any medicinal mushroom or any of the great tonic herbs in the world. I mean, it'll stop a cold, flu, fever, cough instantly. And the big one that's gotten out lately that's a synbiotic or probiotic is ivermectin. Ivermectin is a synbiotic. It's not some pharmaceutical, it's a fermentation byproduct of a friendly bacteria. Yeah, of a friendly bacteria. And so, and ivermectin we're making our own ivermectin products. I mean, this is the silver lining on the whole pandemic insanity, right? Is that we discovered some really epic things. I never knew about ivermectin. I had no idea, but man, I went all the way down that rabbit hole and I was like, whoa, it's a synbiotic. It's a postbiotic. You got to be kidding me. Because I knew about those from way back, over 25 years ago, even. If you're really ill, for example, my recommendation is always to go to the postbiotics and the synbiotics, the products that the acidophilus is producing in your system. That's what we want. Acidophilins, for example, or bifidins. Those are the types of compounds.
Hey there, Inspired Soul. Join in on the conversation in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. What are your biggest takeaways from today's conversation? David Avocado Wolfe worldviews on nutrition is completely mind-altering when you start looking at the consciousness of the reality around us. What are some of your biggest takeaways? And what are some questions that you have for David? Leave them in the comments below. He'll likely be back on in the future, and I'd be honored to ask some questions on your behalf. So feel free to join in on the conversation in the comments below. And with that, back to David in today's episode. This is so trippy. My mind is at this very interesting point in this conversation where I don't know, I've had some conversations with people on the podcast where they say like the earth has different countries, which actually throughout, like the earth is kind of folded in on itself and it has its own chakra system, if you will, and it's got its own seven meridian points, seven chakra points. And India's one of them, and anyway, so on and so forth. And in the detail conversation, I'm wondering like what potentially grows in certain places that activate certain things for the human being could be such a cool conversation to have. Because
That's
as
so
you
important.
mentioned, as you mentioned Noni, like all you had to say to me, and this is my worldview now, thanks to your work, right? So you go, oh, Noni can, I know nothing about Noni, right? Just to be completely transparent. And you go, oh, Noni can actually grow in lava fields. And all of a sudden, like post, like things that have been like post lava, and I'm like, cool. There's something adaptogenic probably about it, but it probably restores a lot of balance because you've had something that's burnt through, and now this thing's growing back. It's restoring balance, and I just start to see everything in that worldview. So, like, I don't know nothing about the plant, but you shared a sentence about it with me, and all of a sudden, I can adapt. Like, if it's a fruit or if it's a herb, what it's probably going to do for me, and that's just something. Having followed your work for like over a decade now, is just something that I now take for granted. It's like this awareness of, this fruit behaves like that at large, or this herb behaves like that at large. These are some of the metaphysical properties or some of the medicinal properties that it would instill within me if I were to consume it within my system. I just wanted to share that and double click on
Yes.
it.
Well said. And ultimately, like I love the mixture of all the great things. For example, I was in the forest up here in the jungle behind my house and found some great medicinal mushrooms, and picked them. And we're going to bake those, as tea tonight. We got nonis growing around, vanillas growing around, chocolate trees growing around, avocados, of course, and all kinds of things. And the communication of that, and just the communication also with the other creatures in the forest, right? The rodents, the pigs, the chickens, they come for that food too, right? And so you're in a negotiation with them, like they're going to get some. They're going to get some. And that's another thing about farming. It's like, hey, if you're so greedy that you want every last little thing, I'm not the right farmer for you. You know what I mean? It's like, what the heck? You need every single like row and every single head of lettuce. And we just don't do that here. What we do here is like, some of it's the animals are going to get some of it. It's just the way it is. But we get most of it, and that's all good.
And even just the romance of some of the old traditional, like indigenous methods where they'd give the best of the harvest back to the earth, and you could sort of argue that some of that was enriching the soil with all sorts of minerals and stuff. I imagine is probably in there. There's some wisdom in that. But even just you look at modern farming practices and it's like fertilizer spray, keep it all off. This is for us. And just the greed is like symbolically, like you can see it, right? As opposed to like the generosity of like, this came from the earth, the irony of that, like remembering to like give it in so that we can actually receive more in abundance. Like the symbology is everywhere.
It's everywhere. It's kind of like this. A friend of mine, he summarized it like this. Let me see if I can recall it. The food is planted without love. So it's sown without love. It's fertilized, watered, and chemicalized without love. It's picked by machines without love. It's delivered without love. It's sold without love. It's then made, cut up, put into dishes without love, and eaten without love. And then we wonder why we have so many health problems. And that's it. If at any stage, by the way, in all of that, even the most chemicalized crap there is the intention of love is there, it can neutralize instantly those energies that have surrounded themselves around the GMO corn or whatever. It can neutralize it. I wouldn't bank the farm on that in the sense of like, well, I'll just neutralize it with my mind and still eat the crap anyway. But to some degree, that does work. The yogis have shown for thousands of years that you can neutralize a poison with your mind, with your consciousness. It's a waste of energy, in my opinion, but it can be done.
Well, this is where those simple practices, once again, of like praying over your food before you consumed it was something the family did all the time. And it was, it was like, why were, and there was this wisdom to it. It's like we didn't have like soaps and washers and all this sort of stuff. Like there was your beliefs were acting on biology to some degree is what the belief was at the time.
I mean, that's right there too, is like what Veda Austin's work shows us, right? Is that our belief is instantly changing the water structure. And in fact, what we're finding out, what we have found out in the 20th and 21st century is that all animals, like your pets, are always eavesdropping on your thoughts at all times. They're psychically connected with you, and that's been proven repeatedly in numerous studies. All kinds of studies. Like your dog knows when you're coming home early. How did it know? They know. Right? Those kind of things. And then the plant also is communicating with you psychically and is constantly in tune with you. Doesn't matter where you are on earth. It's always in communion with you. It knows when you're coming. It knows when the water's coming, and it will hold out for you. We had a cat years ago. It when it was like 1 year old, it got in a car accident and lost its leg. And so, well, it didn't lose the leg, but the leg was shattered. So we had a peg leg. And so it was like kind of a pirate cat. And it lived for then we moved to the forest, and it lived for 13 years in the forest as with wild animals, everything, with a peg leg. Like, you know, it still had its foot, you know, it had a real thing around it, but inside was a piece of metal. And you know, it was tough on the cat because obviously it screws up the hips and everything over the years, and you know, the cat became tougher and tougher. But one time we came back from a trip, and we got to the house, and we actually have two houses, one on each side of the orchard in that spot. And Groove, who lives in the other house, she came running up. She's like, "Oh my God, Eden is like, this is it." So we ran over there, and the cat was just like, and it was in its favorite spot at the floor of the shower. You know, it waited for us. It waited for us. It knew we were coming. And I had made a little tincture from wild lettuce. Wild lettuce, that's a whole story. But basically, wild lettuce is a natural opiate. And so I had been making a tincture with wild lettuce, scoring it, getting the goo out, putting it in alcohol. And I was like, let me get this thing out of pain. So I put 2 droppers full in its mouth. About 10 minutes later, you know, just finally was able to calm it down. About 10 minutes later, just straight facts, it turned around and goes, "Arr!" like a pirate, and died. We're like, what? And what does that tell us? I mean, all those years we called that cat the pirate cat. You know, like, I don't see. Part of what's going on here is we're in some kind of a simulation of some sort, right? All research shows that this matter we believe is so real is actually almost all hollow, right? Everything we believe is so real is just really a frequency and all of that. So are we really living in a material aramonic world full of rocks and calcium and hardening up, calcification and heart attacks? Or are we living in a magical world where things are malleable and things can happen and certain energies can inform and change certain areas? This year we're going back to Machu Picchu. I'm so excited about that. And we're bringing a group. We got a nice group we're taking there. And one of the things about Machu Picchu that so touches me is how the energy, the high vibrational energy and the magic is impregnated into the rocks. It's there. How did they do it? People ask me what it's like at Machu Picchu. I was like, I guarantee you go in there with an open heart, you're going to have the best day ever, for sure. I don't know how it's going to happen, but it will happen. And things will occur, and you'll be like, whoa, what the heck's gone on? I've been in there at times where, you know, I was with Cucho. Cucho is one of the local shamans of Machu Picchu.
Yeah, we're really good friends. He's amazing.
You know Cucho?
Yeah.
And I was
he
like,
is the mountain in so many ways, bro.
He is. He's it.
Got a beautiful gift of serpentine from him, actually.
Ooh.
Yeah, touch me. Sorry,
There's
I've interrupted.
serpentine on that mountain. A lot of in the steps, you know, a lot of serpentine in the steps. And anyway, talking to Cucho, and he's like, let's go down these other terraces, the lower terraces. You know, we're like, okay, cool. So, you know, next thing I know, I'm like, there's like, you know how amazing Machu Picchu is with its cyclopean megalithic ruins and rocks and stuff. And they've got this spring with going right down a little divot in the rock, like a perfect square thing. And the spring water's running out. And it's all kind of hidden in a little area where I was like, whoa, I could strip off all my clothes and completely bathe right now, completely clean myself off after sweating on that mountain for 10 hours and put all my clothes back on and be brand new. And I did that. And I was like, this is unreal. Like, I'm in Machu Picchu Park. I just took a bath in spring water in the park. Nobody saw. And out of nowhere. And it's just like that. You fill in the blanks. You know, something will come up like that every time if you come in there with an open heart.
It's purely magical. That much I can say for sure. Hey, there's a lot. You travel, the open-mindedness, the open-heartedness. You've referenced the spiritual path of an Essene before. What is an Essene, and what is the spiritual path of an Essene?
The Essenes were an ancient race of Jews, basically, or Hebrews back in the day that eventually gave rise to Jesus. There's very good evidence, especially from really good scholars on the matter, including Rudolf Steiner, that Jesus was an Essene. He came from the Essenes, which was a Jewish sect or a Hebrew sect. And then after Christ, the Essenes became Christians. And so, because, they're followers of Jesus. And so that's basically the archetype of it, right? Is the archetype is the Essene is also very strongly oriented towards living healthfully and in a balanced way. The Essenes were likely the first to bring aloe vera out of Africa and into the Levant, right into the area of current present day Israel and Jordan today, especially around the Dead Sea, where they grew aloe vera as one of their major healing plants. The Essenes had an encampment near Qumran, right on the Dead Sea. So that's another important point of reference for the Essenes. Essene is spelled Essenes. So Essene or Essenes. And, the thing about the Essenes is that I first got exposed to the Essenes in San Diego when I was living in San Diego in the early days with the raw foods and the superfoods and everything else. And basically the other Essenes there was like, dude, you're an Essene. And so that's how I got into it. So it's not something you proselytize. You just recognize that you're an Essene, and that's it. So Essenes don't go out there and be like, hellfire damnation, or, that has nothing to do with that. You just recognize that you're an Essene and you take action accordingly. Now, here at my age, here's what's become important, because I'm this year in 2025, I'm going to be 55. So I have to fast, according to the Essene way, 55 days on water this year. That's hard to do, bro. Let me tell you something. That's hard to do. Last year, I did 70 days of water fasting, 70 days. So because it's my religion, I'm forced into action, because if the mind gets in the way, you could skip it this week. Oh, you don't have to do that. Oh, don't do this. Oh, you could maybe do it next year. And after a while, about 6 or 7 years ago, I realized I cannot let my mind talk me out of this. I'm going to religiously do the fasting, come hell or high water. And from doing that, major things have occurred. I mean, there's nothing more powerful, in my opinion, than prayer and fasting. Prayer, fasting. Have a problem? Prayer, fast. Prayer, fast. Don't know what to do? Pray, fast. Confused about your life? Pray, fast. Bad relationship? Pray, fast. It's crazy, the power of it. It's truly hacking the matrix, in my opinion.
I normally ask questions tailored to the audience, also tailored to my own curiosity, but I want to get selfish for just a second, if that's okay. Because I actually spend, it's been a game changer for me, touch wood. I fast 3 days of every month now. And I've just was running the numbers as you were sharing, like 50, that turns out to be about 36 days of every year. And initially it was a hard practice. Now I really look forward to my fasting days. And in fact, what started to happen is the first couple of days generally are hard, and it's interesting to sort of see whether it's just 1 day or 2 days. And I sort of make the judgment in terms of how toxic the previous little bit has been, in terms of like, oh, now it's taken this long to clear out, or actually I cleared it out this fast. Like, that's cool. But yeah, there's a whole dance and a romance there that I've got with fasting. But the fasting and the prayer piece is actually profound when you start feeling into like ancient spiritual teachers as well, spending prolonged periods on fasting and then having downloads and connections, and then coming back. And people didn't say, hey, you were delusional with what you were seeing from hunger and insight. Like, the insights you received were actually divine. It's really, really interesting. And that's not so much what's driving me with the fasting, but even just little things like, for me, what it was driven by was insulin reset. Like, because my heritage is Indian, and we could probably talk about heritage and eating native to your roots and where you come from and what your ancestors have been eating. And that was a big shift for me. Fasting introduced itself to me because India has actually been a place. And so people often talk about Indians as having this pear-shaped bodies, because they generally they're big and strong, but then they also lean out. But when they lean out, they don't lose the tire of the love handles around the middle. It's just something that like Indians it's for most Indians, like, oh, that's a problem. And actually, like, no, that's a gift, because you used to go through famine and feast and famine and feast. So you would retain food for when you don't know when you're going to go into famine next. So your body is actually like adapted into that environment. And I realized, oh, like my body's also doing the same thing, because my ancestors' bodies have been doing this thing. And then the fasting, but never fasting, realizing, oh, I've never actually gone into famine. But my body is wired for famine. And as soon as I started fasting 3 days of every month, like my response to insulin, like protein, like everything started to shift. My cravings, my relationship with food. what I was like, my body was initially like, even just cravings was like a huge piece, how it started to adapt to that. There's a lot in there, but I just wanted to sort of double click on the profundity of fasting, the profundity of eating native to what our ancestors eat. Um, any of those conversations, I'd just like to open them
All
up with
that
you.
is right on target and very important. It's very important, I found over the years, because I started out with 1 day water fast, which is good, and intermittent fasting, very good. I recommend both those very strongly. And then step by step by step, you know, as you become more sophisticated, you learn more. Maybe we do these as groups. Join our group. We do it 4 times a year. We do a detox with people from all over the world, and we're all together in a chat, and we do
Can
calls
you tell
together
us
like
more
this.
about it just while we're at that point in the conversation? Just, yeah, tell us a little bit more
It's
about
just,
these because you do run
I
them online.
Yeah, we do it online. It's all online, and it's just a beautiful way to meet people from around the world. If you're, let's say, you're in Australia and you want to meet somebody from Russia, there's people from Russia, there's people from Australia, there's people from South Africa, there's people from Greece, there's people from the UK, there's people from Canada, the United States, Mexico, Peru. I mean, it's all, the whole world's in there, and there's usually between 200 and 1,000 people in these groups. You know, it's just, I don't care anymore. I'm not like, you know, it's just like, hey, you want to join us? Because I'm doing it anyway. I have to do it. It's my Essene programming, and it's just so important for me to reset everything, especially the insulin reaction, all the derivative problems that develop. So I want to just get to this point. As I got deeper into it, I fasted religiously 1 week every time I did this cleanse with the public. So, you know, we do 2 weeks prep and then 1 week water fast. And then I started realizing this isn't enough for me. I've got to do 2 week water fast. So, and that's what's coming up for me right now, actually, is I'm just beginning into the cleanse right now. It actually officially kick off for me on Friday, and then step by step move deeper in. But when you get into the longer fasting, 14 days, 22 days, 35 days, whoa, man. And it's all about getting past that first 5 days. Once I'm past day 5, I'm in, and I don't need anything. I don't need to look at anything. I've got high energy. Everything's great because you're burning off your reserves, and and it's clean reserves. That's another thing, is over the years of the fasting, I burnt off all the residue of Lucky Charms or whatever, Fruit Loops or whatever, homogenized, pasteurized, glow in the dark milk, whatever that crap was. So my fat's clean. I know that for sure, by the way. This is interesting because when I'm burning that fat off, I have infinite energy and I can go nonstop I could probably, and next one I'm going to do in May, June is going to be 44 days on water. Then I'm going to go to 55 days on water. Then I'm going to go to 66 days on water because my reserves are good. And this is this feast famine thing that's native to a human being. The human being is incredible. And by the way, I'm a fan of putting the human being in the middle as the solution, not the problem. Our whole civilization has this programming coming in from basically Ahrimanic forces and Luciferic forces saying, got to get rid of the human, wipe the human out. Humans all bad. It's like, nope, human's the solution to the problem. Get the human back in the middle and fix the human. That's the best thing to do by far. When you do that with the fasting, it's so insanely epic and profound and deep and clear and clean. And the longer that you go, the deeper the cleansing goes. So all those things of like the joint problems or the insulin reactions or this fungus never left my fungal toenail or whatever.
Back pain, neck pain.
And all that it goes away. So what you said was right, is that I'm driven to do it because the benefits are so great. It's tough. It's a tough path. But once you get in, once you have to prep your body for 2 weeks. That's my recommendation because I tried every other way. And then once you're prepped, then you get into the fasting. Once you get past that first 5 days or so, you're good. You're golden. You can keep going if your fat's clean. Years ago, I had a stem cell thing where it was some doctors I know in LA, and they had lost my previous stem cell sample due to the pandemic, insanity, and all this other stuff. But anyway, they're like, we have to get another stem cell sample from your fat. And I was like, oh God, I don't want them going into my fat. But they're like, look, it'll be painless. I talked to 20 people and they're like, no problem. It's gonna be fine. I did it. Everything was great. And I was like, okay. So I did it. It was a problem. They nicked my kidney. It caused me a problem. But anyway, I'm over it now. At any rate, I did get the fat sample out. And when the doctors looked at it, they're like, what's going on with you? We don't ever see this. And I was like, see what? What do you mean? They're like, look at your fat. And I was like, what's wrong with my fat? And they're like, they're like, this doesn't look like other people's fat. So I said, bring me other people's fat. I want to see it next to it. So they had about 6 or 7 or 8 different other samples and then my fat. And I'm telling you, man, seeing that was really life-changing because everybody's fat is choked down and the volume is turned down of the luminescent light that's naturally supposed to come from the human tissue, like hue man, right? The hue color man, right? It's a hue, it's a luminescence that we're supposed to emit. And their fat looked like it was filled with soot. That's what I go, it's filled with soot. That was my immediate first thought. And I was like, oh, interesting. So when you're trying to burn that off, it's filled with all the chemicals of civilization. It's filled with all the chemicals we're breathing in from automobiles. It's filled with all the chemicals in our food, air, and water, et cetera, et cetera. Once you get that stuff off, it all becomes a lot easier. Because when you're burning it off, because it can be rough burning that stuff off. You can imagine, right? But you need the enemas and the colonics to just drive it all out, and the sweating, and make sure you're not reabsorbing it, and the charcoal and everything else. But once it's off, then your fat is healthy. So now I've got a healthy little bit of fat right here for the next fast, and it's going to be beautiful.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing you sharing all of that, the cleaning out of the system, and even like when you do these fasts, you start to recognize. Yeah, like I was saying before, it's like day 1 or day 2. At what point am I feeling the most fluey, the most head coldy, the most like, and it's like, now we're really, and now it's not really, once you know kind of what's like following your work, you kind of know what's going on. I don't really mind it. It's like, oh yeah, I just need to take it a little bit easier. Give me some, like, let's just hydrate with a little bit extra, get some salt in. Now things are actually starting to flush out. And I kind of get excited, but like, oh, like now's not the time to send off any emails or anything. Now's just the time to do some yin yoga and just process stuff through. But yeah, on the other side of it, I think you can't really explain this to people that haven't gone through it. Just the mental clarity that you get, like when you're running on that clean fat, like it's ridiculous. You're like, talk about human hacking and health optimization. That I feel like that's the ticket everybody's looking for, but they're not really afraid to. They're too afraid to fast. Touch wood.
Yeah, because of the soot, right? Because it's gonna be hellacious to burn that stuff off, and it's just you just got to go step by step by step by step, and that's what we recommend. That's kind of what we do through our cleansing programs, is we just get people going through. Hey, go through the first 2 weeks. Don't fast on water yet. Get to the juices stage, get to the huge amounts of water, get to the intermittent fasting stages, and all that. And then, maybe try 1 day on water. Just try it out. And then maybe second time, okay, let's go to maybe 2 days and try that out. At any rate, what I eventually realized from all this fasting over all these years is that the thing that is most incredible is that the human being produces your own best food. Your fat is your own best food. So people ask all the time, what's the best food for a human being? I got the answer. The exact thing that's demonized like crazy everywhere. Your own fat. That is by far the best food for you. That's the reality. That's the truth. Your body knows its intelligence, stores that for you and as a perfect packet of fuel for you to use. Now, in a toxic environment, okay, we're going to have to get the soot out. I get that. But ultimately, that's the real truth. And when you have built up your fat through years of superfoods and just basically living off your farm and that kind of a thing, I'm telling you, I'm going to go, you'll see me over the next few years. I'm going to do a 44-day water fast and a 55-day water fast and a 66-day water fast and a 77-day water fast. And I'm just going to keep going. And we're going to see how it all goes. And I will not wither away. I'll still be fun. I did the last fast. The last time I did a 35-day water fast, I just did it while working, just normal. Keep the normal schedule. Face your fears, and it's all paper tigers. It's all mental, really.
For a little period there when we had our our second son, we moved back in and spent some time living with the in-laws, and I was fasting during the periods I was living with them. And you forget because I'm having this conversation with you. It's totally normal. Like, I'm like, I fast 3 days. You're like, dude, I fasted 30, relax. It's all good. And I remember when I was talking to them, like, and I was like, oh, this is day 3 of the fast. And like the way they'd ogle me was like, you haven't eaten anything for 3 days. And I was like, yeah, I feel great. And they're like, that's extreme. and I remember like trying to process their worldview, kind of going, oh, actually I can sort of see that from their worldview, it actually is totally extreme. Like they rarely skip a meal, like they're 3 meals a day, rarely skip a meal.
I don't know how to do it. And I think some of that might have to do with food quality and density of nutrition. Whereas what I'm consuming, like I had a durian smoothie. So this is homegrown durian that we had too much of, so we froze it. And homegrown mango, we had too much of that, so we froze it. And we made sugarcane juice the other day, so we blended those in there, threw some superfoods in there, and blended that whole thing up. That level of nutrition, the density is it's going to fatten you up. Let's just put it that way. I can't eat that 3 square meals a day. There's no way. I'd balloon out. It'd be too concentrated. So let's say if it was like, lentils and rice or something like that, it's not a lot of fat there. And so it's not going to fatten you up. So I can see how in civilization people can get into patterns of like 3 square meals a day and never get into the fasting without ballooning up. But for me, I have to fast because I've got my nutrition is too fierce. You know what I mean? It's too concentrated. It's like I've built up reserves now. Okay, I'm good. I don't need to eat now for a while. That's kind of how I look at it.
I love the worldview that you carry in there. It's almost like looking at things, in my opinion, and it's like looking at it top down, right? Like there's the consciousness of the food that we're consuming, and then like what is it really like delivering in its nutrient density. I feel like the world is still kind of, in some ways, looking at it from the bottom up. We're sort of scratching the surface. I saw this meme the other day, which was really cool to see, which was like, the egg white, yes, this much protein, and yes, only this much fat, and yes, only this much, like next to nothing carbs. But then it said like few minerals. And it just said, at the bottom, it just said few minerals. And then it was like egg white with the yolk. And it was like, yes, way more fat. Yes, same amount of protein. And it was like, it had something like 67 minerals. And it was like, oh, and it was just really cool to sort of see like, this is just a general meme that I happen to pass upon, but people are starting to have this conversation around, this is like, yes, you're like, because I've been a gym bro. I've been a gym bro, and like egg whites, getting frozen packets of egg whites versus now like just tuning into like the fats that are in eggs, and, just like, and just watching people tune into like, like there's more minerals. And then you can probably decode that all the way. Like, and that's what I'm saying, like looking from the bottom up, you can decode that all the way. It's like the consciousness, like that was going to be a being, like that embryo was like the nucleus of becoming a being versus just the amniotic fluid to some degree that was, I don't know if it's amniotic fluid, but just the fluid around the egg. It's profound. So this was always going to be a tough conversation today by ways of that. There is so much ground I want to cover and yet there's only so much time that we have to have today's conversation, David. Now, one of the things that would be remiss of me to leave today's conversation without sort of addressing is we've pointed a few times towards this, and we've been using the finger, but the sort of space that opens up that the like almost pointing to is just the beauty of the human being. Like innate, if we just remove ourselves, even though it is ourselves, not to remove ourselves because I'm conscious of that, but like get out of our own way is this thing that I always find myself with the wisdom when it comes to you. It's like, yep, like you just said, the best food you could eat is your own fat, just tap into a fast. And it's like, but we've got all these external forces, all these things sort of guiding us, programming us. We end up in our own way. I just wanted to sort of take a moment to get from your worldview, just the beauty of the human being, the beauty of just, like everything that's actually at play.
One of the untold benefits of the internet is bringing diverse people together, and together is always better. It's always better if we do things together. So, for example, fasting, cleansing, detox, it's way easier when we're all doing it together. My God, doing it by yourself I've done it by myself for years and years. I like the group energy much more. It's just, you're accountable. It's a really cool way to deal with it. It's also just in all these things, farming, spiritual growth, every aspect of a healthy future is a together deal. If we do it together, it's going to be a lot easier. If we do it together, we're going to have a better time at it. If we do it together, we're going to have a lot more fun. If we do it together, who knows? You might meet a husband, wife, significant other, love interest of some sort, right? And it's amazing. That's my take on how to do this is, if you're a newbie, just join a group and just go through the process. And it's tougher in the beginning because you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to also have your brain trying to talk you out of things and all that. And you're going to do the right things and the wrong things at times. Over the years, though, what ends up happening is that I know when it's coming in. I can see, like, for example, my brain's going, yeah, this upcoming fast, maybe just do a week. And I'm like, no, I'm doing 2 weeks. So my brain, I'm already seeing it trying to talk me out of it. And I'm able to identify it. And because I've met that so many times in my life, I know just ignore it and move forward. And those things just take practice. Like anything in the world, the more you do it, the better you get at it. And practice makes perfect.
Yeah, and one of the things, like, I really only really started to understand motivation science around fasting and exercise, because people think motivation is actually something like something to get motivated for fasting. It's like people think motivation is something that kicks in prior to an activity occurring. So it's like, hey, I'll have motivation, I'll go to the gym, or I'll have motivation and I'll start a fast. But actually, the science is in that's not actually how motivation works. Motivation actually kicks in, and I used to notice it when I was running laps around an oval. Yes, running in barefoot. Touch wood, total trippy dippy hippie. But I was running laps around the oval, and you'd sort of get like 2 laps in, and you'd be like, I was only going to run 4, but today I'm going to run 10. You know, like because you're enjoying it. And I find this happens with fasting. It's like, hey, I was only meant to fast for 3 days, but like the itch is ready to be scratched. Like, let's push it to 4. Let's push it to 5. Like, I just want to like I feel strong. I feel solid. Now's the time. Sometimes it's like, oh no, this is not the time to push for harder. You know, like we've got some things coming up, and we definitely want to get nutrition in, and like can't wait to have this. Or someone dropped off a whole box of organic mangoes, and it's like, mate, those are going to go off. Let's get into it. But yeah, it's profound just understanding motivation and how it works, because that can actually be really helpful. Because some people be like, I'm not motivated to do a fast, and it's like, actually, motivation kicks in halfway amongst the activity, not before.
It's just I just tell people, just go through the process. Just try to do the best you can to turn that monkey mind off and just move through the process. Okay, today we're doing this, and that. Get it into your schedule. And that's basically what I'm trying to do every time I'm doing a cleanse. But when other people are involved, I'm accountable, and it's way easier. Together is better. Humans are a social creature. I like what you're saying too about bringing the human back into the middle. We've got to ennoble the human being. Again, this issue of like humans are bad, humans are this, they're that, we got to get rid of humans, and all this stuff is very Ahrimanic. It's very Luciferic, and there's nothing wrong with a human being. All we have to do is just continue to ennoble the human being, make that our goal, and inevitably we will create magic on Earth. It's already here. It's we're not really creating. It's just we're just coming back into attunement with what's already going on around us, versus the human world of boxes and screens and stuff that takes us away from the true magic.
David Avocado Wolfe. Affectionately, Brother Bear, thank you so much for your time and your energy here today, sharing yourself so abundantly with us. Naturally, thank you for your time. Thank you for your energy. Really appreciate you taking the time to do this with us. But again, your life's work continues to inform so much of the way my worldview, the way I approach food, the way I approach nutrition. Just it's foundational, the impact you've had in terms of my relationship with the way that I will. Even just something as fundamental as food as thy medicine. We hear that a lot, but you've actually influenced me to the nth degree in terms of seeing the world around me as being alive, magical. And yeah, like even just like we discussed the blockchain bits, everything we've discussed in today's conversation, I'm so grateful for you. Yes, your time and energy here today, but I'm so grateful for you. So thank you so much for doing the things the way that you do them for the longest time you've been doing them. You literally embody the medicine. Like you are living in Hawaii, on a farm, doing your biodynamic thing, no straight lines. I'm just really grateful for you, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks, bro. Appreciate that. Thanks so much for the show. And everybody out there, we're both wishing you the best day ever.
Because that was going to be my question to close, is what does the future of, like, if you could wave a magic wand and more people are living, we can't all live in Hawaii, but we'd all love to. But, like farming, eating local, connecting to eating how our ancestors ate, fasting a little bit more, being more in tune, more connected. What do you see as the future of humanity were they to adopt more and more of these practices?
Oh, wow. The future is looking bright. I'm because of my research on Rudolf Steiner, also Sri Yukteswar and Yogananda and the other amazing lineage. I think Yukteswar was one of Yogananda's teachers, and as I recall, that's how I got into his stuff. Those guys basically said that the Kali Yuga, the age of darkness, ended in 1899. So what we're dealing with right now with like the world politics and everything else is kind of the last gasp of a bunch of Luciferic and Ahrimanic demons trying to just, control freaks and, we're going to manipulate and all this other stuff. And in the midst of all that is an awakening humanity. Right. So listeners right now are like aware of like, okay, fasting. Okay. I gotta eat organic. Okay. Biodynamic. Okay. Let's get that in, and all these things that we've been talking about. And this is an awakening of humanity because we're just starting into a Satya Yuga, or like a light age. We're just in the beginning of it. So what that looks like to me as an observer of it for many years, trying to figure out like what is actually happening. The kids who are being born, the souls that are coming into the world now, are in that mode. They're more in the light mode. They're not worried about, the demonic forces and the harmonic forces and the luciferic forces and whatever. They're just here to do what they're going to do. So light is coming into the world in larger and larger and larger amounts. So gradually we will see Toto pulling back the curtain, and there's the wizard, trying to pull off the scams. And then the next thing is the community building. It's like, then you realize like, okay, these institutions are all rotted out because the people who weren't of sane or sound consciousness kind of matriculated up into these institutions. So all these new institutions will come in. Biodynamic farming and organic farming will grow and spread and create new institutions, and there'll be new ideals for humanity. And the idea of the martial artist, for example, that lives in attunement with nature out in the middle of the forest, those kind of archetypes we'll see more and more of. The yogic archetype, the sadhus who are up in the mountain meditating in the cave, we're going to see more and more and more interest in those types of archetypes and those types of beings. The idea of the yogi, this is one of my favorite things ever of all time. Okay, so on the last bit, I'm just going to see if I can recall this. This is from Yogananda's interpretation of the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so if you get his version of it, it's in there. I want to say it's in chapter 6. It's in a subtext. I've been looking around this house for that. I want to find it, but I don't think it's here. I think it's in another spot. Anyway, when Yogananda's father observed this, that they were in a palace in one of the great, where Yogananda's from. And so his father worked for the palace in some way, and they were going to put in a pool behind the palace. And as they were digging out the area of the pool, they disinterred out of the ground 4 boxes. 4 boxes. And they lifted the boxes out, and they put, and in India, they know about this. There's still a memory, because we've been through 6,000 years of a Kali Yuga. There's still a memory of what the ideal is, or the ideals were, of the light age that had previously, the 26,000 year age that had become before the Kali Yuga. In India, they still have a sense of this, right? And this is something that's coming now into the future. We're going to have more and more of a sense of this. This is going to sound less and less like a fantasy and more real. And over my lifetime, it's become much more real. So what they found, these 4 boxes, they lift the boxes out. Now they know what that is. That means that in those boxes are yogis who are in such a deep level of samadhi and meditation that they've been in the earth, buried for hundreds of years, maybe 1,000 years. And there's a system in India still in place to revive such beings. So they went and got their books, they got their references, and unfortunately, because the prince wasn't very, this is according to Yogananda's father, it might have been the king, but maybe it was the prince, I'd have to recall the exact specifics. They were a little bit rushing, and they didn't do the precise path to actually what you do when you disinter, that when you open the boxes and then the yogis are in there, like how do you revive them? They didn't do it quite right, but they did revive at least one of the yogis from the story, and he was pissed off because they didn't do it right. He'd been in there for hundreds of years, buried in a box. Now the normal person, from the Ahrimanic deception, goes fantasy, impossible, ridiculous, doesn't make sense, all of that. But the person who's an advancing spiritual student, the person who's an advancing yogi, the person who is a faster and is pushed beyond boundaries where they've gone longer, like, this 35-day fast I did a few months ago, dude, I didn't eat for over a month. I didn't even really drink much water. I mean, I've been around breatharians too, people who didn't eat at all for years. And I've seen what they've lived with me. I've seen that. I've been around that. So I've been like, wow, okay, they taught me how it's possible. When you're exposed to that, then the yogi in the box makes sense. But why would the yogi even be in the box? And the answer is to burn. So the yogi is basically step by step by step is put into a state of samadhi, puts themselves in a state of samadhi, gets in the box, box is sealed or put into the earth upside down, and they meditate in the astral realms to burn off all their karma so they do not reincarnate back on earth. That makes no sense to anybody who's harmonically deceived or luciferic or in some kind of a fantasy, but to people who are real thinkers and real deep meditators, they go, maybe, just maybe such a thing is possible. Anyway, Yogananda lays out this story in his version of the Bhagavad Gita, and he describes how there are other creatures, one that I'm very familiar with because I ran a hot springs in Arizona for 15 years, the Bufo salvarius toad. That toad only comes out for like 2 months out of the year. Half of them are vegetarian, the other half are carnivores, eat insects, anything, and they will feed, mate, and then bury themselves back on the earth for the remaining 10 months. Sometimes they can be in the earth for years. Many dozens of examples when they were curbing and they were cementing in and cobbling the streets of Europe back in the day. They would be up in the mountains breaking through rocks, and they would crack out a toad that was still alive in the rocks. That's called a toad in the hole, and there's very, very reputable sources of that from ancient times. That thing was buried in lava, whatever, it was still alive, and it's in a state of samadhi. Now, when you know about the Bufo salvarius toad, the DMT toad, then it starts making sense. You go, oh, they're surrounded, and their skin is a shield of DMT, and they're in hyperspace, right? That kind of a thing. All of that stuff is going to start coming in, and things related to that, including how did they make these great temples? How did they construct the pyramids? How did all these incredible temples of India, how were they made? All of that's going to become more normal and more to light and more obvious, and the Ahrimanic deception, step by step, will be lost. All the materialism, my name is Elmer Fudd, I own a mansion and a yacht, and all this stuff is just going to be, it's irrelevant. Nobody wants it. You know, the new generations that are being born in don't want those things, right? But when I start talking them in a yoga class about their meditation, their fasting, and then we take them deeper and deeper and deeper, all the way to the concept of a yogi bringing themselves into a state of samadhi, getting into a box, having the box nailed shut, being buried in the earth. Whoa. Then we really got something interesting to talk about. Then we're really got something to look forward to in the Kali Yuga's demise and the Satya Yuga or the Golden Age or whatever's coming in next. It's development, because we're headed into the Dark Ages are shorter and the Light Ages are longer. We're in a long 12,000 year cycle to the peak, the pinnacle of that Light Age. You know, I ran a hot springs in Arizona for 15 years, and the toads are native there. It's the largest North American toad. It's the largest North American amphibian, and it's one of the largest amphibians in the world. And they're just an incredible creature. They're out of this world, literally. And it's a thing in the desert there that eventually it comes your time to smoke the toad, which is, they have a venom that's in their glands here. And, if a dog or coyote tries to chomp on them, it's instantly paralyzed, instantly. Like, it cannot bite down, they'll be stopped. That's how effective of a venom it is. But the venom has a very high amount of DMT in it. Somehow ancient shamans figured out that you could take that stuff on a ceramic plate, and heat it up and breathe in the vapors of it. God knows how they figured this out. And have a profound psychedelic experience that takes you into hyperspace. You go into the astral realms. And then the whole thing about, the yogis and the box and all that stuff, that makes a lot more sense once you've had that experience, because somehow now you're like, oh, okay, it's something like that. Because the toad takes you as far into the bardo state as you can go without dying.
Yeah, the bardos is a very interesting conversation. One of the things I found from people that have experienced the toad is very difficult medicine to integrate back into your 3D reality. They found, like, unanimously, it's been like even something like iboga, people say is very difficult to go through, epic to integrate. But something like the toad, there's like, oh, like I got slingshot out and then I came straight back in, and it's like,
What happened?
yeah, it's this really trippy. Your experience with it?
I've smoked toad about 50 times in my life, maybe more, and so, and I've done that in many different ceremonial settings. And I've done the 100 milligram God dose. That was by far the most profound psychedelic experience I've ever had. And to me, I've always had very good experiences with the toad, very good, like angelic experiences. So even though I'll come into it being like, oh my God, here we go again, when it's all said and done, I was like, that was friggin' epic. What the heck?
What? Some people die, and there's like this real fear around the toad.
Yeah, the toad, it's, it's a venom of a very ancient creature. And so that then, even when you smoke it, the venom can hit you and you're kind of like, ooh, that hit me kind of hard, like, because if you don't smoke it and you try to ingest it, you'll be paralyzed instantly. Like it's a very intense neurotoxin that's in there. And it can have, and so you're really looking at two things. You're looking at the DMT fraction, but also that poison. And so, you have to have a certain ability to manage the poison separate from the DMT part. Because if you can't manage the poison, it could be deadly for sure.
You, Inspired Soul, you made it through to the end of another incredible episode. Thank you so much for your inspirations to evolve. It is such an honor to be your brother walking this path by your side. Thank you to all of you that are subscribed to the channel. Everything that you see around here, these conversations are powered and empowered by your subscription to the channel. Thank you so much for your loving support. To all of you that haven't yet subscribed, please do take a moment. As I'm saying the word subscribe, the subscribe button below is lighting up in the colors of the Inspired Evolution. Please hit that subscribe button, hit the bell notification icon. It helps with everything we're doing here, championing love, positivity, and wisdom around the planet. So please do take a moment and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much in advance. In today's conversation, you notice we had conversations about the consciousness of water with Veda Austin. She's been on the podcast before. I'm going to link that episode for you to dive in deeper into the consciousness and frequency of water and how to program water such an incredible conversation. Tune in to that conversation here on screen now. We also had a conversation about earthing and grounding with Clint Ober, recently released in the new year, so please check that conversation out here now. And also up here, a conversation for you to dive in even deeper. YouTube has hand-selected a conversation for you to dive in deeper for your inspirations to evolve onwards, upwards, and inwards. So go on, take your pick, make your click, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay inspired, keep evolving.